Hi there. This is a brief tutorial on working with textures inside of texBlend, or more precise, working with recipes. So, as you know, we have our recipe browser here, and there are two ways to think about a new recipe. You could start with an existing recipe, tune it, and save it back so that you would have a modified recipe of it. Let's do that for a moment. So for example, if I don't like the blending mode of this recipe, I can switch the blending mode, and it would be a little bit too funky. So I would have the blending mode here. I would, for example, change the blur of the texture. You see way more of the grass. We could tone down the opacity also, and maybe we open up the shadows a little bit on the base image. Just try to use this, and now you can save that, and you can either overwrite the old recipe, or, which is more sensible if you like the old recipe, you say make it a new recipe with a new name, grass 3, and it would show here. As you see, we have that recipe now ready as a new recipe. The other way is, you want to start with a texture which is not even shown here. You go to here, you say new recipe, you would check for possible recipes, or sorry, for possible textures, let's say the cracks in the mud, and you wanted that it's working more on square images because you want to post most of the time to Instagram. You choose that, and now you have a new recipe. It's also wise to say, okay, I rename the recipe and say mod 1, and now you would start tuning the recipes. You would first look into the blend mode. I think this time multiply works pretty well, and you want the blur stronger so that it's not just, it's a faded way to show the cracks in the mud. It's just up to you. Maybe the highlights a little bit down, shadows a little bit up. The base, you want also the highlights a little bit down, the shadows more open, and you probably want that it gets more contrast when you save it. And now again you hit save, but this time you overwrite mod 1, and now your recipe, let's check it out. You would click on a different recipe and you click on mod, and it would recall that. The third method is that you would say, okay, I like in principle the settings, but I want to replace the texture inside the recipe. But first, let's duplicate the recipe and say mod 3, and now we would replace the texture on that and say, okay, we know what we are doing, which means we lose the old recipe if you don't have a duplicate, and we use this leaf, choose it, and now you have replaced the texture in it. And then we have the other option we had already discussed about, rename as a recipe. So why would you want to save the texture of the photo? Remember that when we loaded the texture of that leaf, we loaded an image of about 2:3 aspect ratio, but we had an original image of a 1:1 aspect ratio square. So what we could do is we could save the texture to the photos library, go again here and say replace texture, yes, go to the camera roll, and now we would crop the texture by 1:1, which means square, and now we would have the same aspect ratio we had on the original, also on the blended image. That's for now. See you later.